I'm in the process of changing my gear over from my 3-season setup to my winter setup. It's November 20th. The snow has, started to accumulate here in the city and definitely in the mountain. People are out ski touring looking for little pockets of snow. And what I do normally is I have 2 main Tupperware, big plastic totes that I keep most of my gear for that season kind of pre-sorted. So depending on the trip, I can kind of grab what I need. So I'm switching that over. What I've got set up right now is all of my 3-season gear. And I pulled out a big tote that has a lot of my winter gear. And I figured it would be pretty interesting to walk through some of that, some clothes, some gear, things that I've experimented with, things that I'm still experimenting with. So it's not necessarily that I'm gonna say, this is the way to do it. A lot of people have different preferences. When I go out with other people in the winter, people use different gear. I really find that people's systems are most different in the winter. So I'll just kind of go through it from the top. So I couldn't find a pair of these that suited my needs. So I bought the material from a supplier here in Canada called Hoffman Outdoors. I bought the insulation and the face fabric. It's like 10D Tefta or something like that. I can't remember the details. I didn't want to go about making them myself just because it was, I would have messed them up. So I found a local seamstress. This was a few years back. She sewed them together. I wanted to have side zips. So these go open from the bottom, side zip all the way up to the waist. They can go either direction. You can't unzip them all the way at the top, but it means that I can get them on top of whatever I'm wearing over ski boots. I had her make them big enough to fit around pretty big boots because I want them to be able to just be fit over anything. So they're pretty oversized. When I got them, we hadn't figured out how to do the waist. So I did this. I put in some grommet holes and a bungee cord, and they work pretty well. I'm actually really happy with these. They're very warm. They're very functional. They're not exactly a fashion statement. They're oversized, but I bring these out I don't bring these out on every trip. I would say I bring them out when I'm pretty sure that it's gonna be below -20. -15, it's pretty rare that I've put them on above -20 Celsius, but at that -25, -30, they are very important. They're pretty hard to find. They're definitely hard to find a product that's like this. They're pretty light. They're pretty compressible, a very thin fabric, so they're not the kind of thing that I'd want to abuse, but they definitely work, and insulated pants are part of your winter system. I think you kind of need them at a certain point. Depends on the temperature, depends what kind of activity you're doing, depends how much clothing you're wearing generally. So if you're doing a pretty low output activity, regular snow pants will do. You could wear them all the time. Ski pants, anything that's insulated, that's a little bit tougher, that works. This is because I have something like this because they're normally in my pack, and I want something really light that I can just throw on and get a ton of warmth out of. So I sleep in them sometimes. They work. Just to sort of frame this, when you're in your sleep system and you're sweating a little bit or you have damp clothing, there's moisture moving away from your body that's evaporating. It's going through your insulation. At some point between the inside and the outside of your sleeping bag, or right at the surface, it's below freezing. There's a point in there. So there's a point where that vapor is gonna just condense and freeze. That's why our houses have vapor barriers. And my choice is to use a vapor barrier to deal with that, because the moisture in your sleeping system makes it lose performance over time. So on one night trips, I don't deal with this stuff because you'll be fine. It's really on the second, third, or fourth night that it really starts to take a toll on how your bag works. The second night can be pretty bad. So that first night, for whatever reason, Yes, you're getting dampness and condensation and ice in your sleeping bag, but it tends to maintain its loft. Once you pack it up and there's ice crystals and moisture in there, it just stops working well. So night number 2 can be pretty bad unless you figure out a way to deal with it. So a lot of people use something like this. This is an Enlightened Equipment. Which one is this? It's the Revelation. It's a 50-degree bag, so a very thin bag. It's actually not a bag, it's a quilt. I bought it as a top quilt for summers in Eastern North America, which are very warm and humid. But I kept it to use potentially as a top quilt in the winter. So people use this type of system on top of their winter bag as a way to get that moisture into another system, typically a synthetic quilt like this. I've never done that. It just doesn't interest me. I find dealing with another quilt on top of you kind of annoying, and it's very bulky to pack. So that bag weighs, or that quilt weighs right around a pound, so just under 16 ounces. I think it's 450 grams. But you know, it's fairly bulky, and that weight is mostly the shell fabric. So my choice, or what I've been experimenting with over last year, has been, and years before, was an internal vapor barrier system. The system I played around with at first was just using shell pants and a shell jacket and some kind of vapor barrier on my feet. I'll get into my feet more later. But vapor barriers are basically a non-breathable waterproof material that you get in, and that prevents all the moisture from going into your insulation. So last year I played with another system just because there's so few on the market, there's so few that are readily available. I just played with this because I thought it might work or give me an idea if I liked it, and that's the MSR eBivvy. They sell this as an emergency bivvy bag, and it weighs right around 6 ounces, or it's very thin. I really like the material, the bottom material, which is, I believe, a nylon taffeta. It's like a very thin tent floor fabric. The top fabric is different. I don't think it's not 100% waterproof. This is much more, this is waterproof. The top is this kind of brown gold, which is good enough. I think it really does. It works. I used this a few times last year, and it works. It's big enough that it's easy to get in. On the inside of my bag, like I've got to frame that. This is going inside your sleeping bag, not on the outside like it's designed for. I get in it, inside my sleeping bag, and I wear as little insulation as possible, and that depends on the temperature, but I get insulation in there, and then you sort of get it all around your face, and hopefully all of that moisture comes out through the main opening at the top, outside of your sleeping bag, as warm air escapes from your sleeping bag as you're sleeping, and doesn't go into your insulation. And it 100% works. There's no question it works. I think it is the best way to go. I don't think this is the best option. It's not designed for that. The opening's a little bit tricky. So I was talking to Justin, Mr. Justin Outdoors, and he actually has a true vapor barrier made by Rab. So this is silicone nylon. It's sewed, it's not seam sealed, but I don't think it really needs to be. Most of the moisture is gonna come out through the big hole. So he's lent me this. It's not his favorite system. I think Justin prefers the top quilt option. So he's lent me this. I'm gonna try it out. I think, you know, it's borderline too small for me, but that's what I'm gonna do this year. I'm gonna lay these out, just show you what they are. This is the Rab Vapor Barrier Liner. Just a real simple mummy style design. It has, you know, a built-in stuff sack. And over here, just drawstring around the enclosure. It's a pretty narrow bag, and I fit in it, but I think it's for what you're supposed to use it for. I think it's just a simple, minimal design. This is the MSR eBivvy, much bigger, wider, roomier design, obviously because it's supposed to be used as an over bag, bivvy bag, an emergency bivvy bag. It doesn't have any kind of drawstring to cinch this down. It's got this kind of flap design, something that you could tie this up over your head if you were having to camp out in this. Again, this is not designed as a vapor barrier, but the fabrics itself, I think, are actually not bad for it. So it was a way for me to test out the vapor barrier liner for a sleeping bag, but obviously this isn't what I would pick long term. If it had a different closure, so a different way of cinching around your face, it could be a good option. It's almost the same weight as the one by Rab, and definitely roomier, and you could use it in an emergency to camp out in. Up next are shovels. Shovels are obviously an important tool when you're out in the snow, depending on if you're in avalanche terrain and you need a shovel as part of your avalanche equipment, which is, it's one of the main ones. If you're anywhere where there's a decent amount of snow, a shovel can be very useful. If there's a kind of medium or not that much snow, you can get away with, you know, using things like your snowshoes as a shovel. You know, sometimes I'm out and that's what I do. If it's just to move around a bit of snow, dig something out, not do any serious digging, you can definitely use a snowshoe. It works. There's other things like there's a little digging tool that's kind of, what is it, snow shark or snow claw. That's a lightweight option. But my preference is a real shovel. And I think if you're gonna bring a real shovel out, even though they are kind of expensive, is an avalanche shovel, just because it's hard to find something that's as well made as an avalanche shovel. They have to meet certain standards, and you're just getting, you know, a really nicely welded, just a good tool. So I have two here. These are both certified or, you know, real avalanche shovels, but this is my tiny shovel. I'll put the weight up. They come apart, they're very small, they're very light, and this one is particularly small and light. The other one that I have, and I'll talk about the difference just a little bit, is this one. This is an MSR shovel. Definitely bigger, beefier, longer handle. Quite a bit, you know, just enough to make it much more comfortable for me, and a much more aggressive blade. So if I want to move a lot of snow, this is the one to go with. And if I'm in real avalanche terrain, this is the one I bring, because if I want to save someone's life and get someone out of snow, I'd rather be doing it with this one than this one. So, you know, a shorter handle makes a difference. This one has a T grip. This one has a D grip. And being someone from Canada and having shoveled my whole life, I know that this is the one I want to do real work. So depending on the trip, I might bring this one, or I might bring this one, depending how much digging I'm planning to do. But regardless, it makes a huge difference to have a metal blade that you can really get into hard snow. So yes, you can get a small packable plastic shovel. Yes, you can get less expensive shovels, but because, you know, I'm using them for ski touring sometimes, I just want a good avalanche shovel. And you know, even though this one's quite a bit heavier, I think this one's just under 700 grams or just under 600. I'll put the numbers up. You know, it packs down really nicely, and they're just good tools. So I strongly recommend, even if you're not a person who goes into avalanche terrain, but you're thinking of getting a shovel for winter camping, They make your life very easy. I would just go with an avalanche shovel. You know that you're getting a good piece of equipment. And I leave this one in my car basically all winter, and then you have a good shovel when you need to get unstuck. So that's shovels. I think another important tool that is very practical to have in your winter arsenal. Next up, this is going to get a little bit out of control, because let's talk gloves. And I have a lot of gloves. Gloves are gloves and mittens. Let's see how many I have. So I have a lot of these, thin liner gloves. So 1 pair, 2 pairs, 3 pairs of liner gloves. Then I have what I'd consider sort of lightweight to medium. These ones from Outdoor Research, they're pretty neat. They're kind of a fleece lined with a type of, it feels like almost like a boiled wool on the outside. So I would put these in the medium lightweight. So somewhere in between medium and somewhere above just a thin liner glove. So these ones, this is from Smart Wool. So it actually has a little shell and a little bit of a liner. I'll talk about them all. Gloves are, I could talk for days about gloves and mitts and dealing with your hands. It's one of the biggest challenges. So got those. In the other medium range, I have these that are kind of a soft shell style of mitten, and I got these last year. They're from Black Diamond. I can't remember the model. They were my favorite pair from last year. So again, these are a medium lightweight, medium in between shell, in between a liner and a medium glove. I tried these last year also. These are kind of hybrid they're sold by Decathlon as ski touring gloves. I wish they weren't such an eyesore with this bright yellow, fluorescent yellow. Again, these are going more into a medium weight. And then these are and then a pair of some real medium weight gloves. So leather gloves. These are again from Decathlon. They were some of my favorites that I used from last year. And I'll tell you guys a little bit, the problems that you encounter with gloves and things to be thinking about. Then got some true, so those are true mediums. I would call these also, these are just from a company, Mark's Work Warehouse. I don't know what it is in the States, but just, a construction clothing store. Just, things that you have at a strip mall. Relatively inexpensive, probably $50. Those I use a lot for just regular skiing, but I take them out on trips too. Then some, plain combis. They're a good mitten company. These I wore a lot last year too. Great in camp, going towards a heavier weight. Then I have my last ditch, what I call death mittens or survival mittens. These are a model by Marmot. I think they were called the Expedition. I don't know if they make them anymore. They're Primaloft. They're just tons of insulation in there. I got them in an extra large, so I could actually fit a liner glove in here. And I keep these in my pack as a last ditch emergency. I really try and avoid using these to keep them dry, just in case I really need to, I'm in trouble basically. And last, some rubber kind of work gloves, depending on the conditions. If it's time of year where it's a little bit wetter snow and you think you're going to be doing a lot of work in the snow, these on top of some liner gloves work really well. But overall, I have with me 3 or 4 pairs of gloves and mitts. So my emergency mitts, a pair of mediums, then a pair or 2 of lightweight to medium light. So on a trip I might have these ones, which are just Decathlon fleece or some kind of synthetic sort of liner glove. These great mittens, definitely easier to keep your hands warm in mittens than something when I'm in camp that I can do some work in. And then my last ditch. So that's very typical of my system. And it's just a question of, trying different It's just a question of trying different things, what works for you, what doesn't. You know, some of the things that I encounter are like these ones. I think they're great. These Smart Wool gloves that have a little shell, they're great when they're on. Fantastic glove. But sometimes when your hands get a little damp, and there's another model that I don't have here by Mountain Equipment Co-op. They were good gloves, not too expensive. But whenever I have damp hands, it was really hard to get my hand in. And if I take my hand out, it would sort of pull out the liner and get really annoying. So, you know, all of those things, it's hard to know when you're buying a pair of gloves. So these work nicely. They have that shell, which is nice because they shed a bit of snow. These ones were interesting, but they get all snowballed up. The moment you get them in snow, they get all snowballed up. That's not great. This kind doesn't snowball up, but doesn't really keep you that warm. These ones shed snow pretty well. Mittens, easier to keep warm. Great, because you can throw in a, I don't know if I have any in here, you know, one of these chemical hand warmers, and I did that. I was wearing these last year in -30, -35 with a hand warmer in there. Works really well, and it helps push the moisture out, and they stay dry that way. So it's just a question of playing with, trying things, and you know, and seeing what works for you, seeing what works in different conditions. Some people wear a liner glove all the time and try and get them in their bigger mitten. That's not my preference. I prefer to just have one pair of gloves or mitts on at a time, and I like them to be easy to get on and off, have pretty good dexterity when they're on, and if I need to do something, you know, just tuck them under my arm, do something quick, get them back on. I remember seeing something about that years ago by sort of one of the indigenous people in northern Canada, and they would have a thick, you know, fur-lined mitten, and they would just, you know, take their hands out, do something, then put them back on it, and I find that works better for me. Yeah, I used to have the Canadian, when I was 17, 18, I was in the Canadian Reserve, and we had the big felt-lined winter mittens. Same thing, easy to get on and off. It's a struggle though. So dealing with your hands is a huge, huge challenge. Mittens and gloves can be super expensive, so I prefer going with something a little bit less expensive and potentially having to replace them a bit more often than, you know, spending $200 on a pair of gloves and trashing them by accident one day and then just being done with it. You know, sometimes you do something and it just totally chews them up. These ones I waxed a bit. They're okay. They're good enough. I tend to cut off all of the sort of extra flaps and kind of Velcro things that go on just because they get in the way, you know, dangly things. I have heard that some gloves have something that you can clip to. You know, if you have them and you clip them this way, snow falls in them. The ideal is to hold them when you're not using them down, so that if snow falls or whatever, it doesn't go into them. But, you know, it's a challenge. I'll just say that. Gloves, mitts, when you're outside for a few days, become kind of your nemesis or something that you're always dealing with. Socks and your feet, that's another huge challenge. And I won't get into too much of it, but I will say this. I've experimented with vapor barriers and they work. The first time I used a vapor barrier for my feet, I went to bed at night, and when I got up in the morning, my boots were totally unfrozen, and I put them on and they were perfect. And I knew right away that this was a game changer. The challenge with vapor barriers now, okay, so how do you use a vapor barrier? You either put a bag of some kind directly on your foot and you put your sock over, and then you put all of that in your boot, or you put a sock on, put some kind of plastic bag on top of your sock, and then you put that in the boot. There's pros and cons to both. The pro of putting it on inside or putting the bag on first is that your sock stays dry. The con is that your toes tear up the plastic bag. So what I use sometimes are just bread bags, you know, the ones that you get at the grocery store. I don't think it would be this one. This is too small, but some kind of bread bag that you get at a grocery store, you know, in the kind of bulk aisle for buns and different bagels and stuff like that. But these, they're not tough. I find they last like a day. Sometimes I rip a hole. When you put them on top of your socks, they tend to last a little bit longer sometimes if they don't rip as you're getting your foot into your boot. Last year, I think again, Justin and I started talking about weird things, and he found a bunch of products online for probably working like medical applications, clean room stuff. You know, these are also sort of a foot-ish shaped, super thin. I don't think they'd last. This is an actual tougher version. I think this might be not bad. Still not sure if I would put these in my sock or whatnot, but what I'm gonna be trying this year, and I literally just got them in the mail today from Amazon, are these waterproof hiking socks. They're by, I got 2 pairs, this one I'll just leave sealed up. They're by a company called Randy Sun. Some made in China. My friend Adam used these and tested them a lot this year for hiking, and he doesn't like getting wet feet, and for crossing rivers and stuff. And I don't know how they work exactly, what the design, what's in there. It's not a Gore-Tex membrane. I feel like it's 2 layers of socks with some kind of waterproof membrane in between. He swears by them now and says that they're totally waterproof. And if you kind of like do the air test, they don't let air out, and they apparently don't let water in. So this is, you know, I've got high hopes for these. They're sold as either hiking or ski socks. I'll link them to Amazon. Look, I can't tell you that they work yet, but if they do, I think we've kind of found the holy grail of vapor barrier. I put them on before. I put these on before, and they fit really well. So I got a size medium, which is weird because normally you'd consider them probably a large. They're for size like 10.5 to 13 men, and it's a medium. Large is a massive size. So this is something that I'm going to be playing with, testing out in the next few weeks and over the winter. I'll check back in on these, but worth checking out. I think there's a lot of potential for these. Definitely less annoying than having to deal with bags and stuff like that. So to be continued for vapor barriers, but I will say without a question, a vapor barrier on your feet changes the game. And I've tried using sewn vapor barriers. I made a pair once and I seam sealed them. It wore out in like a day. I know Rab makes a vapor barrier, but everyone says the same thing. There's just too much friction, the seams, the sealing, it just doesn't work. They don't last long. So we'll see how these go. My understanding is that they lasted a season of backpacking. So they should work for a few winter camping trips. They're not cheap, they're around $50 Canadian. But even if they lasted a season for me, I'd be pretty happy. You know, whenever I talk about water bottles, people just freak out. You know, so you get some people yelling at you saying that this is going to kill you because you need to use a Lexan bottle. Then you have other people saying that you should use HDPE. I use these, the HDPE ones. I think that, you know, a key part of your winter system needs to be some kind of bottle cozy. This one I've had since 1998 or 1999. It's just so simple. It works. It fits a Nalgene bottle perfectly. Obviously, that's what it's for. They don't really sell this exact model anymore, but a couple of companies out there make these. This, to me, is, without a question, the system you want. Whether you use HDPE or a Lexan or Triton or whatever they call it now, that's the way to go. I like these because they can handle a bit of swelling and whatever. They're just a little bit more flexible. Some people swear by HDPE for winter. Some people say that you should only, you know, again, don't yell at me. That's what I use, but it works for me. And I know that standard Nalgene bottle works for a lot of people. The other thing that I always have is a small Nalgene bottle. And last year I hunted for these to find the right one, and I finally found a beer can cozy that fits a Nalgene, a little half-liter Nalgene perfectly, and this is a great little system. I got these right before one of the trips I did last year with Justin and Marty, and when Marty got here, I showed it to him, and he was like, "Well, that's so cool," and I was like, "Well, I had to order 4 of these." So Marty has one now, and I think they work. It's a good little system, weighs next to nothing. It's just enough to keep your bottle a little bit more insulated. Definitely not like one of these, but it keeps your drink warmer for longer, and it also means that if, let's say, you throw it in your sleeping bag or whatever, it's not super hot up against you. Down hut boots, and these were a tough one for me. So I have a pair of down hut boots from Mountain Equipment Co-op. I don't find them the warmest thing in the world, so I got these from, what's this company again? Western Mountaineering. Yeah, I got these last year. Super warm, super puffy, tons of loft, definitely warm. The problem with these is whatever they use for the foam, it gets hard when it's cold. So if they're in if they get into your pack and they're in like a weird shape and it's cold out, when you take them out of your pack, they're like frozen like that, and it's pretty annoying. I walk around and camp in these, so I take my ski boots off, I walk in snow, definitely not deep snow because it'll go over the top. But you know, this is another thing that can really make a difference. It depends on the trip. If it's an overnight trip and I know exactly what I'm doing and I just want to get into camp, go to bed, and be done with it, I might not bring them. But they're about 5, I'll put the weight up. It's either 5 ounces for the pair or 5 ounces per boot. I feel like it's 5 ounces for the pair. Under half a pound, maybe. I'll check. I'll put that up. Obviously, things like your stove, your backpack, your tent, they're important, but this is, you know, all kinds of stuff that you have with you that you're going to try. It's going to work sometimes for you. You're going to find that something else is better. You're going to try again. That's kind of the fun of it. So I hope this gave you guys some information and was interesting and helps you guys out get ready for the winter.